Hey, how's it going? In today's video, we'll be going over Boruto Two Blue Vortex chapter 19. I really appreciate this chapter because after several chapters of setup, we're finally moving into the action. The chapter's title this time around is called Konohamaru-chan, which is a reference to one of the themes of this chapter, and that of course being love. And we'll be diving into that theme later in this video. The chapter's cover is pretty good as we get to see Moegi and how she looks very consistent with her anime counterpart in terms of design. I also like the warm background colors. It's very bright and welcoming, which I feel is how Konohamaru views Moegi overall as a person. Okay, so with that being said, let's dive right into the review. So we open up the chapter with the flashback, which is something I predicted from my previous chapter review. And I also predicted that this flashback would give us as an audience more information on the origins of the Loadstone. So we get to see Shinji and Araya prior to the events of Two Blue Vortex chapter 15. The scene opens up with Shinji infusing a small portion of his chakra within Araya's sword. Shinji then goes on to explain that if Araya applies wind-style jutsu to the sword, it would have an effect on manipulating iron sand on a small scale. So we learned a few things. Shinji's chakra is permanently within the chakra blade. The sword itself isn't special, but if a wind-style user handles the sword, it can directly counter Shinji's sand abilities. The user of the Loadstone also gets to control a small quantity of Shinji's iron sand. Araya looks at Shinji almost baffled after the process is completed, even going as far as to ask Shinji if he's sure about this because this is going to make sparring with Araya a lot more difficult for Shinji. But then Shinji states that he doesn't mind this at all as a handicap. And I think this really shows a level of trust between these two characters. Yeah, we haven't seen a lot of them in the series, especially in the manga version of events, but you could tell there's a real brotherhood going on between them. Shinji then proceeds to look towards Gaara's direction, and he says that everything he's doing is for the purpose of protecting his father more effectively. Shinji's desire is to not only get stronger, but to also strengthen the Hidden Sand Ninja's forces as much as possible. Araya then proceeds to tease Shinji for a little bit. He says like, father this, father that, like bro, that's literally all you talk about. And Shinji seems to have a certain lack of social awareness because he answers Araya like, hey, what's wrong with that? And I kind of agree with Araya. You can't build your entire life around one person. There's an importance in strengthening the bonds in your other relationships as well. And I think Shinji is slowly starting to see that, especially giving that level of trust to Araya. In a way, Kawaki is a dark mirror to Shinji. The amount of similarities between them is actually very eye-opening, and the anime prior to Two Blue Vortex really paints a picture of that. Both Shinji and Kawaki held a great power at a young age, a power that was given to them out of their control by either being born with it or being forced to take that power in Kawaki's case. Both of them were adopted by a Kage who also happened to be a former Jinchuriki and understood what it's like growing up without parents themselves. And both of them were willing to do anything and everything to protect their adoptive father, even to the point where they were willing to seal them away to avoid their adoptive parent getting killed. But unlike Shinji, Kawaki cannot be trusted, and Kawaki doesn't seem very likely to trust others anytime soon. So Araya throws some hints to Shinji like, hey, maybe you should pay some attention to Yodo as well. And Shinji doesn't give a specific reply back to Araya. He's kind of like Batman in a way. He's more focused on his mission rather than romance. But he does respond by teasing Araya and saying that he's the one who brings up Yodo a lot. So it's clear from this interaction that there's some sort of love triangle. I think Araya likes Yodo, but Yodo isn't aware of it. And Yodo likes Shinji, but Shinji isn't aware of it. And Araya is the only one paying attention to everything. So he understands both sides of the situation. And I'm honestly surprised Kishimoto went in this direction. I thought he was going to make history repeat itself and have Shikadai be like his father and date and potentially marry the other female of the Hidden Sand trio. But I do like subversions of expectations every once in a while. Araya tells Shinji in the flashback that it's not like that and pretty much downplays his feelings towards Yodo. But let's be honest, it really is like that. But he's denying those feelings because he wants Yodo to be happy. At least I'm assuming that. And honestly, I respect him for it. But the world's a big place. You know, if the darkest timeline doesn't come into existence, then he could definitely find someone else to be happy with. But we fast forward to present day as Araya charges towards Mitsuki and uses the Loadstone to remove the sand particles from his body, thus giving him mobility again, similar to what he did for Yodo and Sarada in the last chapter. Araya tells Mitsuki and Sarada to take lead and focus on attacking Ryu. In the meantime, he'll focus all his efforts in removing the iron sand from their bodies so that they remain in control. I appreciate team fights, especially ones where everyone is being utilized and that each character brings their own unique skill to the table and they strategically work together to take the enemy down. And we really haven't seen anything like this since Boruto Part 1 where Team 7 fought Boro. So Ryu gets amped up at the thought of his enemies being very confident in their strategy and decides to throw a larger quantity of iron sand at Team 7 and Team Shinki. Araya braces for the sand and once again uses the Loadstone to dispel the sand. It ends up working as no one is affected by the iron sand. It's easy to see that Ryu wanted to fill out how powerful the Loadstone was before changing his tactics to compensate for this weapon. So Ryu switches tactics again, and he decides to go underground to try to attack from a different angle. But thanks to Yodo's special hearing, she pinpoints the direction in which the iron sand is coming from, which turns out to be her 7 o'clock direction. Prescient or not, Kashin Koji truly is a skilled tactician. He set up the perfect team to deal with Ryu. I just don't see how the majority of shinobi in the 5 great nations would have been able to deal with Ryu's particle sand. So after his third attempt, Araya once again dispels the iron sand. Ryu comments that Araya wasn't just all talk and provides credibility to Araya's team dynamic. Sarada then goes in to prepare for an attack. She uses a fire-style fireball jutsu to attack Araya. I was actually shocked for this choice of her attack in terms of using fire style. I instantly thought back to Sasuke's second fight with Gaara back in Naruto Part 1 and how it was pretty much established that fire style is rather ineffective against sand users. But Sarada shows why she deserves to be Chunin in the manga because it's nothing but a distraction to give Mitsuki enough time to capture Ryu, and it pretty much works out. Mitsuki took a trick from Ryu's book and decided to attack from underground with his snakes. I like how Mitsuki gives Ryu the death stare, and he looks really cool in his sage mode with his headband down his neck. But anyways, Mitsuki prepares to finish Ryu off. But before Mitsuki can finish him off, Ryu's entire body dissipates into iron sand. So everyone learns that Ryu has more flexibility than they initially thought. Yodo asks Mitsuki did he get Ryu, and Mitsuki says that he didn't and that Ryu managed to avoid his attack. They quickly learn that he could turn his entire body into iron sand. Araya warns everyone once again to be careful because if they're not, he'll control their bodies again. And then Yodo detects Ryu's next location. So this time Araya doesn't wait to counter Ryu's attack. Instead, he proceeds to lock on to the location that Yodo informed him of where Ryu was at. And then he activates the Loadstone again. And it works because Araya moves Ryu's body with the limited version of his iron sand control, thanks to Shinki's infused chakra. Now that Ryu is off balance, Araya alerts the others to get him while he's down. Mitsuki directly attacks Ryu, and it's clear that he's planning to use the same strategy to finish him off. Ryu, being aware of that fact, decides that he's ready to disintegrate into iron sand once again to get away. But Sarada was already aware of Ryu's plan, so she activates her Sharingan, charges a Chidori, and strikes Ryu right in the hip area. But unfortunately, this doesn't matter because he ends up turning himself into iron sand particles and ends up getting away. Oh boy, so we cut to the next scene as we get to see the biggest flop this series has produced so far, and that's Konohamaru putting himself in harm's way and pretty much putting himself in a situation that was easily avoidable. So Matsuri is still upset from the last chapter because she didn't like the fact that he didn't want her to call him Konohamaru-chan. She gets jealous and angry that Moegi gets to call her that, but not her. So Konohamaru says arguably the silliest thing possible. I don't like it. it doesn't feel right. And my thing is, who cares? Like, Shikamaru told him to gain Matsuri's trust and to take her down while she's still an innocent cubling. And he can't even do that right. This man is supposed to be an elite jonin and a direct assistant to the 8th Hokage. Yet he can't act like he's on her side to calm her down or anything. Like, this is crazy. So Matsuri gets even angrier and says, how can Konohamaru be so selfish? And again, instead of saying to Matsuri, you know what? You're right. I am overreacting. You can call me Konohamaru-chan. Moegi who? Instead, he tries to double down on how he feels, which makes her even angrier. And this is just so ridiculous. Again. So we cut to the next scene as Ada watches Konohamaru and Matsuri through her Senrigan. She comments that the issue is not really about what Matsuri wants to call him, but it's the fact that they don't share a relationship that allows it. I like how Ada mocks Konohamaru by including Chan when she's talking about him. And at this point, she's a fan reading the manga like us. But on a more serious note, Konohamaru knew Moegi all his life. She's been through every single phase of his journey. While on the other hand, he's known Matsuri for probably less than an hour. So it makes sense why he'd feel funny about her calling him that. But at the same time, he should have just stayed locked in so that he could get his friend, a potential real love interest, back. Koji asks Ada what is the current situation in the Hidden Sand. It's very obvious he needs to compare the information he gets from Ada to the different futures he has seen with prescience. Ada tells Koji how Konohamaru is pretty much in trouble with Matsuri. Koji then asks, what about Sarada and the others? To which Ada says that it's too early to tell which direction the fight is heading towards. She also comments that Sarada and the others are in no position to help Konohamaru right now, which triggers Boruto. This is the second time Boruto has gotten anxious enough to want to get involved in the fight. And Koji once again tells him not to. Now is not the time. But judging by the look in Boruto's eye, he may just ignore Koji if things continue to get worse. While Boruto's heart is in the right place, we know this is a terrible idea because if Jura would sense Boruto's presence, he would immediately teleport to the Hidden Sand Village and kill him. Speaking of Jura, we actually get to see him in the Shinju's lair as he's discussing what he's learned from reading with Hidari and Mamushi. Jura believes that life forms should obey their instincts and strive towards evolution, with evolution being the ultimate goal to life according to Jura. Jura also believes that humans have a fundamental weakness, that because of their social nature, they restrain themselves through reasoning. Jura says that this is a harmful side effect of beings with intelligence, but he boastfully says that this is something that divine trees don't have an issue with. As we learn from Two Blue Vortex chapter 14, Jura is the incarnation of the Ten Tails. Just like how Hidari is based off of Sasuke, and how Matsuri is based off of Moegi, Jura is based on the original Ten Tails. His only experiences have been of those of an animal. A lion, for example, does not perceive hunting and killing other animals as right or wrong. It follows its instincts and does what it needs to survive. So now that Jura has intelligence, things such as reasoning and love are foreign to him. The monologue he shares with the other Shinju really puts into perspective how truly unnatural they are. They're monsters trying to understand humanity. Mamushi feels indifferent because these are perceived weaknesses that have nothing to do with them. But Jura asserts himself and disagrees. That intelligence is not the only harmful effect of their existences. The other concept that puts the Shinju in danger is the concept of love. So we cut back to the Hidden Sand Village as Matsuri says that her head is full of thoughts of Konohamaru to the point that she's actually going crazy. She questions why she has these feelings. Why is it so painful? And Konohamaru doesn't say anything strategic to get himself out of this situation either. He just aggressively tells her to calm down, which just gives Matsuri another plan. She thinks that if she devours Konohamaru, that she'll never have to feel such pain ever again. Because she has a mind of an adult, but never actually grew up as a natural person, she never had time to understand herself, her emotions, or even what she wants to be out of life. She can't even cope with rejection because it's a foreign feeling to her. Instead of facing her pain and growing from it, as a divine tree monster, she just wants to devour that pain instead. So the scene moves back to Jura as he recalls the events of Two Blue Vortex chapter 11. He respected Ino Shikacho, viewing them as seasoned shinobi, but he couldn't quite grasp why they prioritized Himawari's safety over their own. Jura was never interested in them at all. He just wanted to devour the Nine-Tails chakra. Jura felt as though they were all aware of how foolish the decision was to resist him, but he was confused why they resisted him anyway. Jura specifically calls out Inojin's behavior because in that chapter he lost his composure, and instead of letting Jura take Himawari and devour her, he chose to instead continue to resist, even using his last bit of strength to do so. Jura believes that these acts were foolish. He's both right and wrong from my point of view. Inojin should have backed off. There was nothing he could do at that moment, and his other teammates did the same thing. They backed off because they were terrified. But if you love someone, you'd be willing to risk everything to save them. And that's what makes us human in the first place. Sometimes we just do things that don't make sense. We just sometimes follow what we feel is right. And love is not a weakness. It could be a source of power to discover strength that you never even knew you had. But Jura takes the exact opposite lesson from what he saw from Inojin, and that this type of love is a liability that costed someone their life. It will be very interesting to see his reaction when he discovers that Inojin is still alive. So Jura comes to the conclusion that love is dangerous and that his and the other Shinju's instincts are warning them to understand what love is to overcome it. But in my opinion, this is a task that will never come to be, especially in Jura's case. Because of his admiration for the Hidden Leaf Village's culture, his admiration for humanity, this may overcome him at some point in the story. And I think this is what Kashin Koji is trying to exploit. But it's only a possibility thanks to Jura wanting to resist the concept of love. We cut back to the fight with Ryu, and Yodo immediately detects Ryu in the sky this time and informs everyone of Ryu's new location. Araya then prepares yet another attack using the Loadstone. And once again, he succeeds in attacking Ryu. But Ryu has another trick up his sleeve this time. Ryu starts summoning several Claw Grimes to throw off his enemies. From what I've seen from the last 18 chapters, the Claw Grimes themselves are not that strong. But when they come in a large number and fight alongside someone powerful like Code or the Shinju, then they become an issue. Mitsuki immediately prepares his snakes to attack multiple Claw Grime, and Sarada also changes tactics and uses a fire-style Phoenix Flower Jutsu to take down multiple Claw Grimes as well. And it appears to be working. But unfortunately, more Claw Grime appear through the claw marks of the other Claw Grime. Sarada and Mitsuki unfortunately could just not get to them all. And they proceeded to charge at Yodo specifically. And it makes sense because she is a huge problem for Ryu, because he can't hide as long as she keeps sensing and telling the others where he's at. So Yodo ends up attacking a Claw Grime before getting bitten by another one. I honestly thought she was done for and was going to get turned into a tree. But the MVP of this chapter, Araya, comes to the rescue and attacks the Claw Grime that bit Yodo with his Loadstone. Unfortunately, this turned out to be yet another trick by Ryu. He wasn't interested in turning Yodo into a tree at all. He simply wanted to capture the Loadstone, which is the real threat. So we end the chapter with Team 7 and Team Shiki both in deep trouble. Araya lost the Loadstone and Konohamaru is getting closer and closer to being devoured. It's not looking good for anyone in this situation right now. But hopefully they can figure out a way to turn this mess around without Boruto's help. But until next time, guys, see you later.